Today I'm going to show you how I beat Pokemon Legends Arceus without taking any damage. There's really only one rule to this challenge, and that's if my player character or Pokemon ever take any damage, I have to reset. I put an additional restriction on this challenge where I'm only allowed to save my game if the story forces me back into Jubilife Village. This doesn't really change the difficulty of the challenge, but it does up the consequences of having to reset. We'll fast forward to our choice of starter, as most of the intro is just dialogue and you can't really get hit anyways. I chose Oshawott as my starter for one very specific reason. Oshawott learns Aqua Jet at level 6 and masters it at level 15. Aqua Jet increases the user's turn meter, which is going to be crucial for this run. Unfortunately, my Oshawott also had a speed-reducing nature. This was going to cause problems until I could change it later on with a mint. Our first fight is against Volo and Togepi. For this fight, it's actually impossible to not take damage, so the run really begins after this point. There is no combination of starter or move choice that can result in a clean fight, mainly because Tackle is 100% accurate in this game. Now we move on to the catching tutorial. This is actually a very easy place to take damage simply because of Shinx. You have to engage in a battle with Shinx in order to catch it, and if it breaks out of the first Pokeball, it will attack you. Luckily, I snuck in a backstrike and was able to catch it no problem. Now with the freedom to roam around, I started crafting my team. I was lucky enough to find an Eevee, which I needed to evolve into a Sylveon for a few specific fights later on. I also added a Bidoof, Shinx, Ponyta, and Starly to my team. After a bit of level grinding and some failed attempts at catching the Alpha Rapidash, we achieved our first research star and encountered the first major roadblock of this run, a level 9 Pikachu. I completely forgot about this first fight with Akari, and my level 11 Oshawott was not fast enough to outspeed her Pikachu, resulting in our first reset of the run. Fortunately, you can freely return to the Fieldlands as much as you want until you report to the Galaxy Expedition leader and get your first research star. So after some more level grinding and evolving most of my team, we returned to fight Pikachu. I also completely forgot about the level caps, so my Duat at this point was too strong to listen to me. So I went with my level 20 Ponyta, which was able to one-shot the Pikachu with a Flame Wheel. Before heading out, I claimed my second research star since I already had enough XP, and now my team was back to obeying my every word. Munchlax caused 2 resets, but after raising my Staravia by a couple of levels, we took care of it no problem. The Alpha Qriketoon was next. This was also a breeze for Staravia, one-shotting it with a strong style Aerial Ace. After sneaking past the Alpha Bibarel, defeating both Goomy and Glaceon, we arrived at Kleavor, the first noble fight. I wasn't too scared of this fight, since in my first playthrough I didn't get hit, but the stakes were not as high as they are in this run. I decided just to throw bombs repeatedly rather than sending out a Pokemon to stay on the safe side. This paid off in the end, and we took down Kleavor first try. After defeating Kleavor, I returned to the Fieldlands to add a couple of Alphas to my team. I was successfully able to catch both the Alpha Rapidash and the Alpha Luxio. With these 2 new additions to my team, I was ready to leave the Fieldlands behind and head to the Mirelands. Or so I thought. I had one more fight with Akari before I could actually gain access to the Mirelands. My new Alpha Rapidash was able to take out both the Mime Jr. and Pikachu with ease. Victory over Akari here is actually what unlocks space-time distortions. I knew that I wanted to have a Weavile on my team for later on, so I decided to pay one more visit to the Fieldlands to pick up a Sneasel. The distortion didn't take long to spawn, and once it did, this is what happened. I couldn't believe my luck. Weavile was my first rare spawn of the distortion. I felt incredibly confident in my ability to take on the rest of the game with Weavile now by my side. My new Weavile handled Volo's Togepi and Gible with ease, but sadly Rapidash missed on Toxicroak, which resulted in a reset, losing Weavile in the process. Since Weavile is so rare, I decided to try a different approach to clear the first part of the Mirelands. I went back to the Fieldlands to wait for another distortion to regain at least a Sneasel. While I was here, I caught both a Kadabra and a Gastrodon. Kadabra was for the Misfortune Sister fight, and Gastrodon was my plan for Volo, as well as some upcoming 2v1 fights. Both of these Pokemon eventually did exactly what I needed them to do. Togepi and Gible both missed on Gastrodon since it was obscured, and Kadabra outsped the Toxicroak. Next up was Ursaluna. I took a gamble on Gastrodon, hoping I could use the same obscuring strategy I used against Volo, but unfortunately Ursaluna was faster than me. At this point, I remembered about one very specific Alpha in the Fieldlands I would more than likely be able to catch. Floatzel has an incredibly high base speed of 115, so I knew Ursaluna would stand no chance. I didn't know it yet, but this Floatzel was going to carry me for so much of this run. It definitely was one of my MVPs. I spent a bit of time training up Floatzel before I went back to face Ursaluna, but once I returned, the fight was easy. Floatzel was able to take 2 extra turns due to its very high speed and using Agile-style Aqua Jets. A final Strong-style Water Pulse was enough to seal the deal and take down Ursaluna. With Ursaluna defeated, the only remaining story objective was to quell the Noble Lilligant. Lilligant is arguably the easiest Noble, and with my Rapidash being as strong as it was, the fight was over in no time. With the second Noble quelled, it was time to wash off the mud and head to the Coastlands. The first fight in the Coastlands is also the first 2v1 battle in the game. Here, we have to take on both an Eevee and a Glaceon at the same time. These fights are particularly tricky since I have to juggle the turn meter of both opposing Pokemon instead of just a single one. My first idea was to utilize my super speedy Floatzel, which sadly didn't work. Agile-style Aqua Jet didn't do enough damage to take out the Eevee, and its speed was too low to be able to take a third turn and move before the Glaceon would. Since it looked like Floatzel wasn't the answer here, I decided to try Gastrodon, which unfortunately got hit despite being obscured. Rather than relying on the RNG of being obscured, I decided to opt for a more consistent strategy for this fight. One of my viewers suggested I try catching a ghost Pokemon, and then use that Pokemon to one-shot the Glaceon. That way, Eevee wouldn't be able to do any damage to me, no matter how many turns it took. So that's exactly what I did. I zipped over to the Fieldlands to catch a handful of Drifblims so I had some nature and level options. I leveled up the best one I found and returned to take on Irida. Despite this strategy working against Irida, entering the Coastlands this way was almost certain to set me up for failure later on. You see, right before you challenge Arcanine, you have to fight all 3 Misfortune Sisters back to back to back. Clover and Coin were going to be a breeze, but Charm was the real problem as she is the only sister to use 2 Pokemon, one of which is Gengar, whose base speed is quite high. I felt Floatzel was going to be the best option for taking on Charm, but with having invested all my resources into Drifblim for the Irida battle, Floatzel was just too weak. So I decided to reset and come up with a new strategy where Floatzel would be able to beat both Irida and Charm. I paid a visit to Zizu so Floatzel could learn and master Iron Tail for super effective coverage against Glaceon, and then I spent all the money I had on medium XP candies and leveled Floatzel up as high as it would go. This setup was exactly what was needed for Floatzel to win against Irida. Aqua Jet took care of Eevee, and then Glaceon fell to an Agile-style Aqua Jet followed by an Iron Tail. I felt much better about gaining entry to the Coastlands this way compared to using Drifblim, since I now felt more equipped to deal with Charm. So after a bunch of dialogue, catching a ghost, and befriending a demonfish, we finally arrived at Firespit Island. I had my strategies in place, all I could do was give it a try. We've come to the YOLO part! Clover and Coin were both very easy as expected, each of their Pokemon being defeated by a single hit from my Rapidash and Kadabra. Now for the real challenge. Charm leads with Rhydon, whose base speed is quite low. This allowed me to build up extra turn meter against it and be better prepared for Gengar. With Rhydon defeated, I just needed to hope that Floatzel was fast enough to move before Gengar. Floatzel was indeed fast enough to move first, and with a couple of Agile-style Aqua Jets and 1 Water Pulse, the victory was mine. The final foe that stood before me was the noble Arcanine. Arcanine can be tricky mainly because the arena is so small. This, in combination with failing to practice the fight, led to an ill-timed dodge and ultimately a reset. I would fail this fight a second time before finally achieving victory on my 3rd attempt. With the Coastlands cleared, it was time to head to the Highlands. But not before another double battle, this time against Adamant. Since Floatzel worked so well against Irida, I decided just to try Floatzel here too. This didn't go so well. The Eevee here is slightly stronger than Irida's, and Leafeon's physical defense is quite high, which helped it survive against an Ice Punch from Floatzel. Floatzel was looking like it just wasn't going to work. But as it turns out, I already had the solution to this fight. The Drifblim that I tried to use against Irida would definitely work here, especially since this was just for one battle isolated in Jubilife. Once I leveled up the Drifblim, Leafeon stood no chance. A strong-style Mystical Fire was enough to eliminate Leafeon, leaving only Eevee, which wouldn't be able to damage my Drifblim at all. Another Mystical Fire finished off Eevee and allowed me passage into the Highlands. Before heading up the mountain, I decided to add 2 new alphas to my team, Toxicroak from the Mirelands, which was going to help speed up the experience grind significantly, and Ambipom from the Coastlands, which was basically to replace Gastrodon as a Mud Bomb user. The Highlands is fairly straightforward, with only a few fights before the Noble. I was only really concerned about the triple battle against Melly right before Electrode, but that isn't the only Melly encounter in the Highlands. He's actually also your first fight, albeit much less intimidating. He only uses a level 40 Skuntank, which was no match for my brand new Alpha Toxicroak. Moving up the mountain, the next fight is against Ingo. However, before taking on this fight, there was something else I needed to get first. Since the Highlands contain Wild Hisui and Sneasels, I could finally pick up a Razor Claw to evolve my Johtonian Sneasel into a Weavile. Weavile was going to be crucial for the later part of this run, and also for Ingo. After evolving Sneasel, it was time to face off against Ingo. Ingo led with Machoke, so I led with my Alakazam. I, of course, outsped it and took it out no problem. Tangela was next, and unfortunately, I didn't have enough turn meter to move before Tangela did. Thankfully, Tangela went for a Stun Spore and also missed. I was now safe to switch into Weavile, which finished off both Tangela and the following Gliscor with ease. Next up comes one of the hardest fights in the entire challenge, a 3-on-1 against Melly. Here, Melly uses Skuntank, Zubat, and Skorupi. After a few failed attempts, we had this fight. And hope I get the knockout. Okay, I do. Zubat, please miss. It went for Hypnosis! Let's go! With a bit of luck and some clever turn manipulation, we picked up the victory against Melly much faster than I thought I would. All that was left was Electrode, arguably the toughest Noble to beat damageless. Electrode is the fastest Pokemon in Legends Arceus, so I decided to play it safe and only throw bombs and never engage it in battle. This strategy was working, and it looked like I was about to escape the Highlands. Until... oh, no! Unfortunately, RNG got the better of me here. A Voltorb landed in the exact same location where I ended a dive, causing a very frustrating reset. I did manage to beat Electrode on the second attempt, but not without suffering multiple losses to Melly along the way. Before moving on, I want to quickly address this. Once the Noble is hit by the final bomb, the game pauses basically everything. This is to prevent anything wonky happening while the game transitions from the fight to the victory cinematic. During this time, you have no control over your character, and you can't actually take damage from anything. This basically seems to be identical to being hit by False Swipe while already being at 1 HP. Since we weren't assigned any damage, we were safe to continue. After a fairly straightforward battle with Akari, we arrived at the 5th and final location of the game. The Icelands took me multiple tries to finally get right. The first two fights of the Icelands are a 2v1 against the Warden Garrick, followed by a 3v1 against Sabi to unlock Braviary. I tried several combinations of Ambipom being obscured, and that didn't work. I tried Floatzel with a speed boosting nature for both the 2v1 and the 3v1, and that didn't work. I had one lucky attempt that just happened to work, but sadly I got hit during the Avalugg fight and had to reset. After a bit more trial and error, I finally found the winning strategy. I leveled up Floatzel a bit more, and gave it an attack boosting nature for the Garrick fight. Giving it an attack boosting nature here made it able to take out the Frostlass with a single Aqua Jet, and then chip away at the Glalie with some Agile style Aqua Jets. Just before taking on Sabi, I changed Floatzel's nature to be a speed boosting nature. With Sabi being a 3v1, I felt maximizing Floatzel's speed was the safest play here. The Sabi fight was pretty intense, so I'll just let the fight speak for itself. I'm gonna just try something. It's probably stupid. At this point, I just have to try stuff. So, we hit the Electivire first to reduce its turn meter. Okay. Now I go after Magmortar to knock it out. Okay, the problem is that Aqua Jet is not guaranteed to kill the Rhyperior, but the Water Pulse is. I can knock out either Rhyperior or Electivire. Personally, I would go for the Rhyperior and hope for the Thunder Wave or look around. It's true. I'm going for the Rhyperior. It might be wrong, but I'm going for it. There's no way it went for Thunder Wave. Let's go. Turns out leaving Electivire until last was the right move after all. With Sabby defeated, all that was left was a very quick Braviary fight, and then Avalugg again. The most problematic part about the Avalugg fight is the Icicle Cannon when its health is below 50%. It fires at a much faster rate than it does in the earlier stages of the fight. If you don't time the first dodge perfectly, you will get hit by the final Icicle. Because of this, I came up with a strategy that would have me in the fight for as little time possible while Avalugg's health was under 50%. I decided to get Avalugg down to 51%, and then dodge its attacks until I could send out a Pokemon to battle it. After depleting the health bar, I threw as many bombs as I could. Doing this basically got Avalugg down to almost 25% health before the more intense mechanics started. From here, I just had to dodge the speedy Icicle Cannon once, and victory was sure to be mine. Yes! With some well-timed dodges, Avalugg was quelled and we were ready for banishment. It's important to note that while you are banished, you aren't able to learn any new moves or master any moves either. So I had to make sure my team was fully ready to do everything that needed to be done while I was banished before I got banished. I took some time to make my team a bit stronger and then headed back to Jubilife to accept my fate. Alright, banishment time. There's not actually a whole lot that needs to be done while you're banished. You just have to defeat or catch the 3 alpha Pokemon in each of the Lake Spirit Caves. So we headed out to do just that. Toxicroak took care of the Goodra with no problem, and Weavile tore apart the Zoroark. For Overqwil, since my only real option was Ambipom's 85% accurate Mud Bomb, I decided to throw in a little flair. Before leaving the Icelands, I caught the Alpha Garchomp, which coincidentally had an attack-boosting nature. After maxing its attack to a disgusting 405, I marched proudly over to the Mirelands, where once again, I was humbly reminded about level caps. Goodbye. Forgot about level caps. So yeah, Garchomp was a no-go. This time I just went to the Mirelands first, in case Mud Bomb missed, which it fortunately didn't. I then cleaned up the other 2 alphas with the same strategies as before and secured the red chain. Next up was Benny, the cafe owner turned ninja, followed by the commander. I decided just to try both fights using Weavile since I had gotten quite comfortable with the turn manipulation. Turns out I had learned everything I needed to, and I took out Benny and the commander on my first try. Since I sided with the Pearl clan, next up was to catch Palkia. The awkward part about this is that you have to catch Palkia in a battle, so you can get unlucky and take damage if Palkia breaks out of the ball. It's gonna happen. The first attempt failed, however I did manage to catch Palkia on my second try. After a super quick battle against Charm to get some of the Origin Ore, we returned to Jubilife to craft the Origin Ball. All that remained was one final climb to the top of Mount Coronet to defeat Origin Dialga. It took me a few tries, but once I had the timing down of all of its attacks, we achieved this. And there you have it, folks. Pokemon Legends Arceus beaten without my player character or Pokemon taking a single point of damage. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to come by and check me out for a live stream. I do challenge runs and other Pokemon content like this all the time. The link to my channel will be in the description down below.